The alarm went off at 4:47 a.m., 3 minutes before it was supposed to, but Maya Chen was already awake. She had been staring at the ceiling for the past 20 minutes, listening to the distant hum of delivery trucks making their early rounds through downtown Portland. The sound reminded her of something else, something from before, but she pushed the thought away, as she always did. Today was just another day behind the counter at Grind Coffee, serving overpriced lattes to tech workers who barely looked up from their phones long enough to say thank you. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. By 5:30 a.m., she was unlocking the front door of the small coffee shop nestled between a vintage clothing store and a yoga studio on Morrison Street. The familiar routine began immediately. Grind the beans, check the espresso machine pressure, arrange the pastries in their display case, count the register. Her movements were precise, economical, practiced. The other employees always commented on how efficient she was, how she never seemed to waste a single motion when preparing drinks or cleaning equipment. They called it natural talent. Maya knew better. The morning rush hit at exactly 7:15 a.m. like it always did. A steady stream of customers flowed through the narrow space, each with their complicated orders and specific requirements. Maya worked the espresso machine while her coworker Jessica handled the register and attempted small talk with anyone who would engage. Maya preferred the machine work. Less conversation, more focus, and the rhythmic sounds of grinding, steaming, and pouring created a kind of meditative state that helped her get through the long shifts. Double shot oat milk cortado, extra hot, light foam, Maya called out, sliding the cup across the marble counter to a woman in an expensive blazer who was already halfway out the door, phone pressed to her ear. The woman grabbed the drink without acknowledgment and disappeared into the morning crowd. Jessica rolled her eyes from behind the register. "I swear, some of these people act like caffeine is a life or death situation," Jessica said during a brief lull between customers. She was 22, fresh out of Portland State with a degree in communications, and treated the coffee shop job as a temporary stepping stone to something better. She often tried to engage Maya in conversations about their future plans, their dreams, their escape strategies from the service industry. Maya usually deflected these discussions with a smile and a quick change of subject. "Maybe it is for some of them," Maya replied, wiping down the steam wand with practiced efficiency. At 28, she had been working at Grind Coffee for almost 3 years, longer than any other employee except the owner. The consistency seemed to baffle her younger coworkers, who cycled through the job every 6 to 12 months before moving on to internships, graduate school, or career positions that matched their degrees. The truth was that Maya had nowhere else she needed to be. This job provided exactly what she required: steady income, minimal background checks, and the kind of anonymity that came with being just another face in Portland's vast service economy. The customers saw her as part of the scenery, efficient and forgettable. Her coworkers knew her as quiet but reliable, someone who picked up extra shifts without complaint and never called in sick. The simplicity suited her purposes perfectly. Around 10 a.m., the morning rush began to taper off, leaving behind the usual collection of freelancers with laptops, students with textbooks, and retirees who treated the coffee shop as their daily social hub. Maya used the slower pace to restock supplies and deep clean the espresso equipment. She had developed her own system for maintaining the machines, breaking down each component methodically and reassembling everything with the kind of attention to detail that impressed even the service technicians who came for monthly maintenance. "You really don't need to be that thorough," Jessica observed, watching Maya disassemble the group head of the espresso machine for the 3rd time that week. "The repair guy said these things can go months without that level of cleaning." Maya continued her work without looking up. "Precision matters," she said simply. "When something is built to perform under pressure, every component has to be perfect. One small malfunction can cascade into complete system failure. Jessica shrugged and returned to her phone, scrolling through social media posts from college friends who had landed marketing jobs and consulting positions. Maya finished her cleaning routine and moved on to inventory, counting supplies with the same methodical approach she applied to everything else. Her hands moved automatically through the familiar motions, while her mind wandered to places she tried not to visit during working hours. The afternoon shift brought its own rhythm. The lunch crowd consisted mainly of office workers grabbing quick caffeine fixes between meetings, their orders simpler and their patience thinner than the morning customers. Maya worked through the rush with the same steady efficiency, her movements economical and precise. She never seemed hurried, even during the busiest periods, but somehow managed to maintain faster service times than her coworkers. "How do you do that?" asked Marcus, the newest hire, during a brief break between orders. He was a college junior studying business, earnest and eager to excel at everything he attempted. "You never look stressed, but you're always the fastest on the bar." Maya handed him a freshly cleaned portafilter. "Muscle memory," she said. "When you repeat the same actions enough times, your hands learn the sequence. Your brain can focus on other things." "Other things like what?" Maya paused for a moment, considering her answer. "Like watching the door, observing patterns. Staying aware of your environment." She realized how that sounded and quickly added, customer service stuff. Anticipating what people need before they ask. Marcus nodded enthusiastically, though Maya could tell he didn't fully understand what she meant. How could he? He had grown up in suburban Portland, gone straight from high school to college, and his biggest concern was maintaining his GPA while working part-time. He had never needed to develop the kind of situational awareness that Maya carried like a second skin. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The afternoon wore on with its predictable patterns. Regular customers appeared at their usual times, ordered their usual drinks, and settled into their usual spots. Maya knew them all by sight, though she rarely learned their names unless they specifically introduced themselves. There was the freelance graphic designer who always ordered a single origin pour-over and worked alone in the corner booth. The retired teacher who came in every Tuesday and Thursday for a decaf Americano and would chat with anyone willing to listen about her grandchildren. The group of nursing students who gathered every afternoon to study for exams, surviving on espresso shots and shared pastries. Maya found comfort in these patterns. The predictability allowed her to anticipate needs, prepare orders before they were requested, and maintain the kind of seamless service that kept customers happy and management satisfied. It also allowed her to notice when something was different. When someone new entered the established rhythm of the coffee shop's daily life. Around 3 p.m., as the afternoon light began to slant through the large front windows, Maya noticed a man she had never seen before. He was probably in his 40s, with the kind of posture that suggested military background, even in civilian clothes. His eyes swept the room methodically before he approached the counter, a habit Maya recognized because she shared it. He ordered a black coffee, paid in cash, and chose a seat near the back wall where he could observe the entire space. Maya prepared his order with the same care she applied to every drink, but found herself glancing in his direction more frequently than usual. Something about his presence felt different from the typical customers. He wasn't reading, wasn't working on a laptop, wasn't engaged with his phone. He was simply sitting, watching, and waiting for something or someone. Jessica noticed her distraction. "Everything okay? You seem a little tense." Maya forced herself to focus on the espresso she was pulling. "Just tired," she said. "Long week." But she wasn't tired, and it hadn't been a particularly long week. She was responding to instincts that had been honed through years of training and experience. instincts that told her when a situation required additional attention. The man's presence wasn't necessarily threatening, but it was notable, and Maya had learned long ago that notable situations deserved careful monitoring. The stranger remained in the coffee shop for exactly 47 minutes. Maya knew because she had been tracking his presence without appearing to do so, using peripheral vision and reflected images in the espresso machine's polished surface to maintain awareness of his location and behavior. He finished his coffee slowly, checked his phone twice, and occasionally glanced toward the front windows as if expecting someone to arrive. When he finally stood to leave, he disposed of his cup properly and walked past the counter without additional interaction. Maya watched him through the front window as he crossed the street and disappeared into the crowd of pedestrians. Only then did she realize she had been holding her breath slightly, her shoulders tense in a way that reminded her of old habits she thought she had successfully abandoned. She forced herself to relax, to breathe normally, to return her attention to the familiar routine of coffee preparation. "Friend of yours?" Jessica asked, having noticed Maya's attention to the departing customer. "Never seen him before," Maya replied, which was technically true. She had never seen that specific man before, but she had seen others like him. The careful posture, the methodical observation, the way he positioned himself in the room, these were all familiar patterns from a life she had left behind. The rest of the afternoon passed without incident. The nursing students arrived for their regular study session. The freelance designer finished his work and packed up his laptop, and the usual collection of evening customers began filtering in for their after-work caffeine fixes. Maya worked through her closing routine with the same precision she brought to every task, sanitizing equipment, restocking supplies, and preparing the coffee shop for the next day's opening. As she locked the front door at 7 p.m., Maya allowed herself one quick glance up and down the street. The evening crowd was typical for Portland: young professionals heading to happy hour, students walking to evening classes, tourists consulting their phones for restaurant recommendations. Nothing unusual, nothing that triggered her instincts for caution. Just another normal day in her carefully constructed normal life. The walk to her apartment took 12 minutes, a route she had memorized down to the number of steps between intersections. Maya lived in a studio on the 3rd floor of a converted warehouse, a space that was small but served her needs perfectly. The rent was reasonable, the building was secure, and her neighbors were the kind of people who minded their own business. She had chosen the location carefully, prioritizing factors like multiple exit routes, clear sightlines from the windows, and proximity to public transportation. Her evening routine was as methodical as her work routine. Dinner was simple and nutritious, prepared from ingredients that could be stored for long periods without refrigeration. She reviewed the day's events while she ate, noting anything unusual or worthy of additional attention. The man at the coffee shop warranted consideration, but not necessarily concern. Portland attracted all kinds of people, including former military personnel who had settled in the Pacific Northwest after their service ended. His presence could be completely innocent. After dinner, Maya allowed herself 1 hour of what she called maintenance time. Tonight, that meant carefully cleaning and inspecting a small wooden box that she kept locked in her bedroom closet. The box contained items that most people would consider unusual possessions for a coffee shop employee: precision tools, cleaning supplies, instruction manuals written in technical language, and several small metal components that gleamed despite their age. Maya handled each item with the same careful attention she brought to maintaining the espresso machines at work. She cleaned every surface, checked every moving part, and verified that each component was in perfect working condition. The routine was partly practical and partly meditative, a way of maintaining skills that she hoped never to need again, but refused to let atrophy completely. As she worked, Maya's mind wandered to the years before Portland, before grind coffee, before the carefully constructed anonymity of her current life. She had been someone different then, someone with a different name and a different purpose. The transition from that life to this one had been gradual and deliberate, a process of learning how to be invisible in plain sight, how to blend into the background of civilian society while maintaining the capabilities that had once defined her identity. The hardest part hadn't been learning to make coffee or memorizing customer orders. The hardest part had been learning to appear ordinary, to suppress the hypervigilance and tactical thinking that had kept her alive through multiple deployments. She had spent months practicing casual conversation, forcing herself to laugh at jokes she didn't find funny, pretending to care about celebrity gossip and social media trends that seemed trivial compared to the life and death decisions she had once made daily. But gradually, the performance had become more natural. The other employees at Grind Coffee saw her as quiet but competent, perhaps a little antisocial but reliable. The customers saw her as part of the scenery, efficient and forgettable. Even Maya herself had begun to believe in the persona she had created, to find comfort in the predictable rhythms of civilian life. Tonight, however, the appearance of the stranger had stirred something in her that she thought had been successfully buried. As she finished her maintenance routine and carefully returned each item to its designated place in the wooden box, Maya found herself thinking about contingency plans she hadn't reviewed in months. Exit strategies, communication protocols, emergency procedures that belonged to her former life but might become relevant again if her carefully maintained cover was somehow compromised. She locked the box and returned it to its hiding place, then prepared for bed with the same methodical approach she brought to everything else. But as she lay in the darkness, listening to the familiar sounds of the city settling into evening, Maya remained alert in a way she hadn't experienced in years. Her subconscious mind was processing the day's events, running threat assessments and probability calculations that belonged to her military training rather than her civilian life. Sleep came eventually, but it was lighter than usual, punctuated by the kind of dreams that blended memory with possibility, past training with present vulnerability. Maya woke several times during the night, instantly alert and listening for sounds that didn't belong to her normal environment. Each time, she heard only the usual urban symphony of distant traffic, settling building materials, and neighbors living their own quiet lives. Morning arrived gray and overcast, typical Pacific Northwest weather that matched Maya's unsettled mood. She went through her usual routine: shower, simple breakfast, review of the day's weather and traffic conditions, but found herself paying closer attention to details that normally wouldn't register. The way the morning light fell across her apartment, revealing or concealing potential observation points from the building across the street. The sound of footsteps in the hallway, their rhythm and weight suggesting the identity and intentions of her neighbors. The contents of her go-bag, stored in the closet next to her regular work clothes, still packed and ready despite months of disuse. The walk to Grind Coffee took the same 12 minutes as always, but Maya varied her route slightly, taking a path that allowed her to observe the coffee shop from multiple angles before entering. Everything appeared normal: the same early morning pedestrians hurrying to work, the same delivery truck servicing the businesses along Morrison Street, the same familiar rhythm of urban life beginning another day. Maya unlocked the coffee shop and began her opening routine, but found herself paying closer attention to the view from the front windows. The angle allowed observation of most of the block, including the spot where the stranger had stood the previous afternoon, before disappearing into the crowd. This morning, that spot was occupied by a bicycle messenger taking a brief rest, then by a woman walking her dog, then by no one at all. Normal patterns, normal people, nothing that triggered her instincts for concern. Jessica arrived for her shift at 7 a.m., slightly late as usual, full of stories about her evening plans and weekend adventures. Maya listened with the appropriate level of interest while preparing the espresso machine for the morning rush. The familiar routine of grinding, tamping, and brewing helped settle her nerves, allowing her to focus on the immediate tasks rather than the vague sense of unease that had followed her from the previous day. The morning customers arrived on schedule, each with their familiar orders and predictable behavior patterns. Maya served them with the same efficient professionalism she had developed over 3 years of coffee shop work, but found herself cataloging details with unusual attention. The graphic designer's laptop bag had a new sticker, suggesting recent travel. The retired teacher mentioned visiting her daughter in Seattle, an unusual deviation from her typical grandchildren-focused conversation. The nursing student seemed more stressed than usual, probably indicating upcoming exams. None of these observations suggested anything concerning, but Maya's training had taught her that situational awareness required attention to all details, not just the ones that seemed immediately relevant. Changes in established patterns could indicate shifts in circumstances that might prove significant later. The key was to notice everything while appearing to notice nothing, to maintain awareness without displaying the kind of hypervigilance that would mark her as different from her civilian coworkers and customers. Around 10 a.m., during the brief lull between morning rush and lunch prep, Maya was cleaning the espresso machine when Jessica approached with an unusual expression of curiosity mixed with confusion. "That's weird," Jessica said, holding her phone and frowning at the screen. "What's weird?" Maya asked, not looking up from her cleaning routine. "I just got a text from some number I don't recognize. It says they're looking for someone who used to work here, but they don't have a name. Just asking if we have any employees who might have military experience." Maya's hands stilled on the cleaning cloth, though she forced herself to continue the motion after only the briefest pause. "What kind of military experience? It doesn't say specifically. Just asks if anyone here might have served overseas, particularly in specialized units. They say they're trying to reunite someone with old colleagues for a reunion or something." Jessica looked up from her phone. "Do you know if any of our coworkers ever served? I mean, I know Marcus is still in college, and the evening shift people are all pretty young." Maya resumed her cleaning with deliberate calm. "Maybe they have the wrong coffee shop. Portland has dozens of places like this. Yeah, probably." Jessica put her phone away and returned to her prep work, already moving on to other topics. "Although it would be kind of cool if we had some secret veteran working here. Like someone with interesting stories who just never talked about their past." Maya didn't respond, focusing instead on the mechanical precision required to properly clean the espresso machine's group head. But her mind was racing through possibilities and implications, running the kind of risk assessment protocols she had hoped never to need again. Someone was looking for her, or at least looking for someone matching her general description. The text to Jessica could be reconnaissance, a way of confirming her presence without direct contact. The question was whether this represented a threat or an opportunity, and Maya didn't have enough information to determine which. The stranger from the previous day could be connected, or it could be coincidence. The inquiry could be legitimate, former colleagues seeking contact for benign reasons, or it could represent something more dangerous. As she worked through the lunch rush, Maya found herself automatically implementing security protocols she hadn't used in years. She varied her position behind the counter, ensuring she always had clear sight lines to both entrances and multiple escape routes. She memorized the faces and behavior patterns of every customer, cataloging anything that seemed out of place or potentially threatening. She checked her phone regularly, not for personal messages, but to monitor communication channels she had established long ago for emergency situations. The afternoon brought its usual collection of regular customers, but Maya noticed several new faces mixed among the familiar ones. A woman in business attire who ordered a simple coffee but spent an unusual amount of time selecting a seat, eventually choosing one that offered good observation angles. A man who appeared to be reading a newspaper, but whose eyes regularly swept the room in patterns that suggested surveillance training. A couple who seemed to be having a casual conversation, but whose body language indicated they were primarily focused on monitoring the coffee shop's staff and customers. Any one of these observations could be explained by innocent circumstances. Portland attracted new residents regularly, and the coffee shop's location made it a natural stopping point for people exploring the neighborhood. But the combination of unusual customers, the previous day's stranger, and Jessica's mysterious text created a pattern that Maya's training had taught her to take seriously. During her afternoon break, Maya stepped into the coffee shop's small back office and made a phone call to a number she had memorized but never used. The conversation was brief and conducted in a kind of verbal shorthand that would be meaningless to anyone unfamiliar with military communication protocols. "Status check," she said when the call connected. "Clean on our end," came the immediate reply. "But there's chatter about Portland. Someone's been asking questions." "What kind of questions?" "The kind that suggests someone knows more than they should. Are you compromised?" Maya considered the question carefully. Possibly. Nothing definitive yet, but the pattern suggests active interest. Recommendations? Maintain current position for now. Monitor and assess. I'll update. If the situation changes, copy that. Stay safe. The call ended, leaving Maya with more questions than answers, but also with the reassurance that her former colleagues were aware of the situation and monitoring it from their end. She returned to her position behind the espresso machine, resuming her work routine while maintaining the heightened awareness that had become second nature during her military service. The rest of the afternoon passed without obvious incident, but Maya noticed that several of the suspicious customers remained longer than typical coffee shop visitors usually did. They ordered additional drinks, appeared to be working on laptops or reading, and generally behaved like people settling in for extended stays. This could be innocent. Many customers used grind coffee as a temporary office space, but it could also indicate surveillance activity. As closing time approached, Maya found herself thinking about the evening ahead and the decisions she might need to make. Her current life in Portland represented 3 years of careful construction, 3 years of building a stable civilian identity that allowed her to blend into the background of ordinary society. But that life had always been contingent on maintaining her anonymity, on avoiding the attention of people who might recognize her true background and capabilities. If someone was actively searching for her, if her cover was beginning to unravel, she would need to decide whether to fight to maintain her current identity or to abandon it and disappear into another carefully constructed life elsewhere. The decision would depend partly on who was looking for her and why, information she didn't yet possess. As she began her closing routine, sanitizing equipment, and preparing the coffee shop for the next day, Maya allowed herself to consider the possibility that her time in Portland was coming to an end. The thought brought an unexpected pang of loss. She had grown attached to the routine, to the familiar faces of regular customers, even to her coworkers with their mundane concerns and predictable patterns. But attachment was a luxury she had learned to live without. If the situation required it, she could disappear from Portland as completely as she had appeared 3 years earlier, leaving behind only the vague memory of an efficient but unremarkable coffee shop employee who had never quite fit in, but had never caused any trouble either. The question was whether that level of disruption was necessary, or whether there might be other ways to handle whatever situation was developing. Maya finished her cleaning routine and prepared to lock up the coffee shop, but her mind was already working through contingency plans and probability scenarios, preparing for possibilities that belonged to her former life, but might soon become relevant to her present one. As she stepped out onto Morrison Street and locked the front door behind her, Maya noticed a figure standing in the shadows across the street. positioned in almost exactly the same spot where the stranger had waited the previous day. The light was too dim and the distance too great for her to determine whether it was the same person, but the posture and positioning suggested similar training and intent. Maya began walking toward her apartment, maintaining her usual pace and route, while using reflective surfaces and peripheral vision to monitor whether she was being followed. After 2 blocks, she was certain that she was. The follower maintained professional distance and used proper surveillance techniques, but Maya's counter-surveillance training allowed her to detect the presence despite the skill with which it was conducted. Instead of leading the surveillance to her apartment, Maya altered her route, heading toward a busier part of downtown where crowds and multiple exit options would give her more flexibility. She needed to determine whether this was hostile surveillance, or whether someone was simply trying to make contact in a way that wouldn't compromise her civilian cover. The answer came sooner than expected. As Maya turned down a side street that offered good concealment, she heard footsteps approaching from behind, moving faster now and no longer attempting to maintain covert distance. She turned, ready to run or fight depending on what the situation required. "Sergeant Chen?" The voice was quiet but carried clearly in the evening air. "We need to talk." Maya turned slowly, her body automatically shifting into a balanced stance that would allow for rapid movement in any direction. The man approaching her was not the same one from the coffee shop, but he carried himself with the same unmistakable bearing that marked former military personnel. He was younger than she had expected, probably early 30s, with the kind of lean build that suggested recent active duty rather than years of civilian life. "I think you have me confused with someone else," Maya said, her voice steady and neutral. She kept her hands visible but relaxed, ready to move if the situation required it. The man stopped about 10 feet away, far enough to appear non-threatening, but close enough for quiet conversation. Staff Sergeant Maya Chen, formerly assigned to the 75th Ranger Regiment, specialized in weapons systems and tactical support. Deployed to Afghanistan twice, Iraq once, classified operations and locations that officially don't exist. He paused, studying her reaction. Should I continue? Maya's expression didn't change, but internally she was running rapid calculations about threat levels and response options. The man knew details that weren't in her official military record. Information that suggested access to classified files or direct knowledge from someone who had served alongside her. "You seem to know a lot about someone who doesn't exist anymore." "She exists," the man said quietly. "She's just been making excellent coffee for the past 3 years, while pretending to be someone else." He reached slowly into his jacket pocket, moving deliberately to avoid appearing threatening. "My name is Lieutenant Colonel David Park. I was Captain Park when we worked together in Kandahar." Maya studied his face more carefully, comparing the features before her with memories from years of deployment rotations and temporary assignments. Recognition came gradually, filtered through changes that military service and civilian life had carved into both their appearances. "You were with the 160th Night Stalkers. Still am, technically, though my current assignment is a bit more complicated." Park glanced around the quiet side street, ensuring they weren't being observed. "I'm here because we have a situation that requires your specific skill set. Not Staff Sergeant Chun's skills, Maya Chun's skills." "I don't know what you're talking about." Maya began walking again, forcing Park to fall into step beside her if he wanted to continue the conversation. "I work at a coffee shop. I make lattes and clean espresso machines. Whatever situation you're dealing with, you need to find someone else." Park kept pace easily, his stride matching hers in a way that suggested familiarity with coordinated movement under pressure. 3 days ago, a terrorist cell acquired a shipment of stolen military hardware, advanced weapon systems, communication equipment, and enough explosive material to level several city blocks. The theft occurred from a secure transport convoy. That was supposed to be impossible to intercept. Maya continued walking, but her attention was fully focused on Park's words, despite her outward appearance of disinterest. Sounds like a job for the FBI or Homeland Security, or any number of agencies that actually handle that kind of thing. It would be, except for one detail. The thieves knew exactly what they were looking for. They bypassed millions of dollars worth of standard military equipment and went straight for specific items. Items that were part of a classified weapons program that only a handful of people even knew existed. Park's voice dropped lower. Items that you helped develop and test during your final deployment. Maya stopped walking. They were standing at the corner of a quiet intersection, far enough from the main street that their conversation wouldn't be overheard, but visible enough that any observers would see them as two people having a casual encounter rather than a clandestine meeting. That program was shut down. All prototypes were supposed to be destroyed. Most of them were. But a few items were retained for further evaluation, stored in secure facilities under classification levels that should have made them impossible to locate or steal. Park turned to face her directly. Someone with intimate knowledge of the program guided this theft. Someone who knew exactly what was taken and how to use it. Maya felt the familiar weight of tactical thinking settling into her mind, the automatic analysis of threats and variables that had once been as natural as breathing. She pushed it away, forcing herself to maintain the mental distance she had cultivated during 3 years of civilian life. Even if what you're saying is true, I can't help you. I'm not that person anymore. Maya, Park's use of her first name, was deliberate, a reminder of shared experiences and mutual respect that transcended current circumstances. We've identified the likely target. Tomorrow afternoon, there's a major technology conference downtown. Over 3,000 attendees, including executives from defense contractors, government officials, and international delegates. The stolen weapon systems are designed for precision strikes in crowded environments. Maya closed her eyes briefly, feeling the weight of implication settling around her like a familiar but unwanted garment. You think they're planning an attack during the conference? We think they're planning something that will make international headlines and demonstrate capabilities that most people don't know exist yet. The stolen prototype weapons are designed to penetrate standard security measures. Traditional law enforcement and even most military units won't know how to counter them effectively. Maya opened her eyes and studied Park's expression, looking for signs of deception or manipulation. She found only the kind of focused intensity that she remembered from combat situations, the look of someone dealing with genuine life and death. Circumstances. What makes you think I can do anything about it? I've been out of the military for years. I work in a coffee shop. Because you didn't just help develop those weapon systems. You were the primary tester. You know their capabilities, their weaknesses, and their operational parameters better than anyone else still living. Park paused, letting the weight of that statement settle. And because 3 of the other people who worked on that program have died under suspicious circumstances in the past 6 months. Maya felt ice forming in her stomach. Died how? Car accidents, medical emergencies, random violence. All explainable individually, but the pattern suggests systematic elimination of anyone with detailed knowledge of the stolen systems. Park's voice was gentle but relentless. You're not just hiding from your past, Maya. Your past is hunting everyone who shared it. Maya turned and began walking again, but her pace was different now, more purposeful and direct. Park followed, reading her body language correctly as a sign that she was transitioning from civilian avoidance to tactical engagement. Tell me about the conference security. Standard protocols. Metal detectors, bag searches, armed security at entrances and key locations. Background checks for all attendees, restricted access to certain areas. Park pulled out his phone and showed Maya a detailed floor plan. The conference is being held at the convention center. Multiple entrances, large open spaces, thousands of people moving through a predictable pattern. Maya studied the floor plan, her mind automatically identifying choke points, escape routes, and tactical advantages. Despite 3 years of deliberate disengagement, the analysis came as naturally as breathing. What's the timeline for the suspected attack? Best intelligence suggests sometime during the afternoon keynote session. Maximum attendance, high-profile speakers, optimal media coverage for whatever message they want to send. Park switched to a different screen showing attendee lists and security schedules. We have assets positioned around the perimeter, but we need someone inside who can identify and counter the specific weapon systems if they're deployed. Maya handed the phone back to Park, but she had already memorized the key details from the floor plan and security information. I assume you're not asking me to do this as a favor to an old colleague. Full reinstatement at your previous rank, with backdated pay and benefits. Complete identity protection for your civilian cover, and Park hesitated slightly. A chance to make sure those weapon systems never get used against innocent people. Maya stood at the corner, watching evening pedestrians move through their normal routines, oblivious to the possibility that their ordinary lives might be disrupted by violence they couldn't anticipate or understand. 3 years ago, she had walked away from the responsibility of protecting people like these, choosing personal anonymity over continued service. Now that choice was being challenged by circumstances that connected her past actions to present dangers. I need to think about this, Maya said finally. Park nodded, though his expression suggested that thinking time was a luxury they couldn't afford. I understand. But Maya, the conference starts at 8 a.m. tomorrow. If you're going to help us, we need to begin preparations tonight. Maya checked the time on her phone. It was almost 8 p.m., which gave her roughly 12 hours to make a decision that would either preserve the careful civilian life she had constructed or destroy it completely, in service of preventing a potential catastrophe. Where are you staying? Park gave her a hotel name and room number, along with a secure phone number that would reach him immediately. Whatever you decide, I want you to know that asking for your help wasn't my first choice. I know what you gave up when you left the military, but you're the only person left who has the knowledge we need. After Park disappeared into the evening crowd, Maya stood alone at the intersection, feeling the weight of decision settling around her like gathering storm clouds. The safe choice was obvious: maintain her cover, stay away from the conference, and hope that traditional security measures would be sufficient to prevent whatever attack was being planned. The safe choice protected the life she had built and preserved the anonymity that had allowed her to find peace after years of combat stress and operational pressure. But Maya had never been someone who chose safety over necessity. Her military service had been defined by a willingness to take risks when the mission required it, to place the welfare of others above her own comfort or security. Those instincts hadn't disappeared during 3 years of civilian life. They had simply been suppressed beneath layers of routine and deliberate normalcy. Maya began walking toward her apartment, but her route took her past the convention center where tomorrow's technology conference would be held. The building was lit by security lights, its modern architecture creating geometric shadows across the surrounding plaza. Security personnel were visible at the main entrances, conducting what appeared to be routine patrols and equipment checks. From a tactical perspective, the convention center represented both an attractive target and a challenging operational environment. The large open spaces would allow for maximum casualties if explosive devices were deployed effectively. The multiple entrances and exits would provide numerous infiltration routes for attackers, but also numerous escape routes for potential victims. The predictable crowd patterns would make it easy to position weapons for maximum effect, but also make it possible to anticipate and disrupt attack vectors if you knew what to look for. Maya circled the building slowly, noting camera positions, security checkpoints, and the general flow of pedestrian traffic, even during evening hours when the building was largely closed to the public. Her observations were automatic, the result of training that had become so deeply ingrained that tactical analysis required no conscious effort. As she walked, Maya found herself thinking about the weapon systems that Park had described. She remembered the development process, the months of testing and refinement that had gone into creating tools designed for precision strikes in complex environments. The technology was elegant in its lethality, capable of defeating standard protective measures and delivering devastating effects with minimal preparation or support infrastructure. In the wrong hands, those weapons could turn tomorrow's conference into a massacre that would dominate international news for weeks and fundamentally change how people thought about public gatherings and civilian security. In the right hands, with proper knowledge of their capabilities and limitations, they could potentially be neutralized before any attack occurred. Maya completed her reconnaissance of the convention center and headed home, but her mind was already transitioning from civilian concerns to operational planning. If she decided to help Park and his team, she would need to prepare quickly and thoroughly. Her civilian skills would be irrelevant. She would need to resurrect capabilities that belonged to Staff Sergeant Chen, and hope that 3 years of disuse hadn't degraded them beyond operational effectiveness. Her apartment felt different when she entered it, smaller somehow and less secure than it had seemed that morning. Maya moved through her usual evening routine, but with modifications that reflected her changing circumstances. Instead of her normal casual dinner, she prepared a meal designed for sustained energy and optimal nutrition. Instead of relaxing with a book or television, she spent time stretching and conducting the kind of physical preparation that preceded demanding operations. The wooden box in her bedroom closet took on new significance as Maya considered its contents in terms of immediate, tactical utility rather than long-term maintenance. The tools and components she had preserved were designed for specialized applications that might prove relevant if Park's intelligence was accurate about the stolen weapon systems. Maya removed each item from the box and laid them out on her bed, conducting the kind of detailed inspection that preceded mission deployment. Everything was in perfect condition, maintained with the obsessive care that reflected both professional training and personal discipline. The muscle memory of handling these tools returned immediately, her fingers moving through familiar patterns of assembly and disassembly without conscious direction. As she worked, Maya allowed herself to think about the people who would attend tomorrow's conference. Technology executives and government officials, yes, but also students, researchers, journalists, and support staff who were simply doing their jobs and trying to build careers in their chosen fields. People like her coworkers at Grind Coffee, fundamentally innocent and unaware of the specialized knowledge and capabilities that existed in the shadows of their ordinary world. The decision crystallized gradually, not as a sudden moment of clarity, but as a slow acknowledgment of inevitability. Maya had spent 3 years trying to convince herself that she could be just another civilian, that her military training and experience could be permanently set aside in favor of a simpler and safer existence. But the training wasn't something she had acquired. It was something she had become, woven into her identity at a level that civilian life couldn't completely overwrite. At 11 p.m., Maya called the number Park had given her. He answered on the first ring, his voice immediately alert despite the late hour. "I'm in," Maya said without preamble. "What do you need me to do?" Park's relief was audible even through the compressed audio of the phone connection. "Thank you. Can you meet us tonight? We have a safe house set up about 20 minutes from your location. We'll need to brief you on current intelligence and coordinate with the security team." Maya was already moving toward her closet, pulling out clothes that would be appropriate for operational rather than civilian activities. "Send me the address. I'll be there in 30 minutes. Maya." Park's voice carried a note of something that might have been apology or warning. "Once we begin this, there won't be any going back. Your civilian cover will be compromised, and there's no guarantee we can rebuild it afterward." Maya paused in her preparations, considering the full implications of what she was about to undertake. Tomorrow morning, she was supposed to open grind coffee at 5:30 a.m., beginning another day of the routine that had defined her life for 3 years. Jessica would arrive at 7 a.m. with stories about her evening plans. Marcus would ask earnest questions about coffee preparation techniques. The regular customers would order their usual drinks and settle into their familiar patterns. Instead, she would be preparing to infiltrate a potential terrorist attack, using skills and knowledge that belonged to a part of herself she had tried to leave behind. The life she had built in Portland might not survive what was about to happen, regardless of whether the mission succeeded or failed. "I understand," Maya said finally. "Send me the address." The safe house was located in an industrial district on the outskirts of Portland, the kind of area where warehouses and light manufacturing facilities created a landscape of functional anonymity. Maya arrived to find a converted office building that appeared vacant from the outside, but showed signs of recent occupation if you knew what to look for. Park met her at a side entrance, leading her through a series of security checkpoints that included biometric scanners and equipment that she recognized as military-grade communication scramblers. The building's interior had been configured as a temporary command center, with multiple workstations displaying real-time intelligence feeds, communication equipment that connected to networks she couldn't identify, and tactical gear laid out with the precision that characterized professional military operations. 3 other people were present in the main briefing room, all carrying themselves with the bearing that marked current or former special operations personnel. Park introduced them quickly. Agent Sarah Martinez from an agency that wasn't specifically identified, Technical Sergeant Robert Kim, who served as communications and electronics specialist, and Dr. Jennifer Walsh, who was described simply as a weapons systems expert. "Before we begin," Dr. Walsh said as Maya took a seat at the briefing table, "I need to verify your identity and clearance level." She placed a tablet in front of Maya and indicated a series of biometric sensors: fingerprints, retinal scan, and voice pattern recognition. Maya completed the identification process, watching as her military record populated on multiple screens around the room. Her photograph from final deployment appeared alongside service history, specialized training records, and security clearance information that she hadn't seen in 3 years. It felt strange to see Staff Sergeant Chun's official existence displayed so prominently after spending so long as simply Maya, the coffee shop employee. "Identity confirmed," Dr. Walsh announced. "Welcome back to the classified world, Sergeant Chun." Martinez activated a large wall display showing satellite imagery of downtown Portland, with the convention center highlighted and surrounded by detailed tactical overlays. "Here's what we know as of 2 hours ago. Intelligence intercepts suggest that the attack will occur during the 2 p.m. keynote presentation, when attendance will be at maximum capacity. We estimate between 3,200 and 3,500 people will be present in the main auditorium." Kim pulled up additional screens showing communication intercepts and electronic surveillance data. "We've identified at least 4 individuals with confirmed terrorist connections who have registered for the conference using false identities. Background checks failed to flag them because their cover documentation is extremely sophisticated, probably state-sponsored rather than amateur fabrication." Maya studied the photographs and identification documents, noting details that suggested professional intelligence tradecraft rather than typical terrorist operations. This isn't a suicide bombing or random violence attack. Someone is investing significant resources in infiltrating this specific event. "Exactly," Park confirmed. "Which brings us to the stolen weapon systems." Dr. Walsh activated another display showing technical schematics that Maya recognized immediately. The XM47 modular weapons platform, designed for precision targeting in complex environments. Portable, easily concealed, and capable of defeating standard security measures. Maya leaned forward, studying the technical specifications with the detailed attention of someone who had spent months testing and refining the system's capabilities. How many units were stolen? 4 complete systems, plus ammunition and targeting modules. Dr. Walsh highlighted specific components on the schematic. Each system is capable of engaging multiple targets with minimal preparation time. In the hands of trained operators, they could inflict massive casualties before security personnel could respond effectively. Maya ran rapid calculations based on her knowledge of the weapon's capabilities and the convention center's layout. With proper positioning and coordination, 4 systems could cover the entire main auditorium. Even with immediate law enforcement response, you're looking at hundreds of casualties in the first few minutes. Martinez nodded grimly. Which is why we need someone who understands how to identify and disable these systems before they can be deployed. Standard bomb disposal techniques won't work because these aren't explosive devices in the traditional sense. Maya turned to Park. What's my insertion method? I can't just walk through the front door and start searching for hidden weapons systems. Park handed her a conference badge and identification packet. Dr. Maya Nakamura, independent security consultant specializing in technology risk assessment. You're attending the conference as part of a consulting contract with one of the major exhibitors. The identity will hold up under casual scrutiny and gives you legitimate access to all areas of the building. Maya examined the credentials, noting the attention to detail that had gone into creating her cover identity. How much time do I have to familiarize myself with the building layout and security procedures? The conference opens at 8 a.m. We can get you inside during the early setup period, around 6 a.m., which gives you roughly 2 hours to conduct reconnaissance before general attendance begins. Kim indicated a series of communication devices. You'll have real-time contact with our support team, plus access to building security feeds and emergency response protocols. Dr. Walsh placed a specialized device on the table in front of Maya. This is a detection scanner calibrated specifically for the stolen weapons systems. It will identify their electromagnetic signatures from up to 50 meters away, but you'll need to get within direct visual range to determine exact positioning and disabling procedures. Maya picked up the scanner, feeling its weight and examining its controls. The device was smaller than a typical smartphone, but considerably more sophisticated, with multiple detection modes and data analysis capabilities. What about backup? If I locate the weapons but can't disable them alone, we'll have tactical teams positioned at multiple entry points, but they won't be able to enter the building without risking massive civilian casualties if the terrorists decide to accelerate their timeline. Martinez pulled up floor plans, showing positioning of various response teams. Your job is identification and neutralization. Our job is containment and evacuation if things go wrong. Maya studied the tactical displays, absorbing information about team positions, communication protocols, and contingency plans for various scenarios. The operation was complex but well planned, with multiple layers of backup and support systems, designed to maximize the chances of success while minimizing civilian casualties. There's one more thing, Park said quietly. The terrorist cell has demonstrated access to intelligence that suggests they may have inside information about security procedures and response protocols. We don't know how deep the compromise goes, but we're operating under the assumption that standard law enforcement channels may not be secure. Maya looked around the room, noting the serious expressions on every face. You think there's a mole in the security apparatus? We think someone with access to classified information has been feeding intelligence to hostile actors for months, possibly years. Dr. Walsh indicated a series of timeline charts showing the pattern of compromised operations and security breaches. The theft of the weapon systems was too precise to be random. Someone provided detailed information about transport schedules, security measures, and the specific location of classified materials. Maya felt the familiar weight of operational complexity settling around her, the recognition that what appeared to be a straightforward mission was actually a multifaceted problem with political and intelligence implications that extended far beyond preventing a single terrorist attack. So I'm not just looking for weapon systems. I'm looking for evidence of ongoing compromise and possibly identifying hostile actors who may still be active within government or military organizations. That's beyond the scope of tomorrow's mission, Martinez said carefully. But any intelligence you can gather about how these people obtained their information would be valuable for future operations. Maya spent the next 2 hours reviewing detailed intelligence files, studying building layouts, and familiarizing herself with the communication and detection equipment she would carry during the mission. The technical aspects came back to her quickly, muscle memory and procedural knowledge reasserting themselves despite 3 years of civilian life. As the briefing concluded and the team began preparing for a few hours of rest before dawn operations, Maya found herself thinking about the coffee shop she wouldn't be opening in the morning. Jessica would arrive to find the doors locked and no explanation for Maya's absence. The regular customers would be inconvenienced, perhaps confused, but ultimately they would find other places to get their morning caffeine. By tomorrow evening, if the mission succeeded, she might be able to return to that life and resume the careful normalcy she had constructed. But she suspected that something fundamental had already changed, that the process of resurrection Staff Sergeant Chun's capabilities would make it impossible to completely suppress them again. Maya checked her watch. It was almost 3 a.m., which gave her about 2 hours to rest before beginning preparations for infiltrating the conference. She found a quiet corner of the safe house and lay down on a provided cot, but sleep came slowly and was punctuated by the kind of vivid dreams that belonged to her military service rather than her civilian life. When she woke at 5 a.m., Maya felt the familiar combination of anticipation and focus that preceded dangerous operations. She had spent 3 years trying to forget this feeling, and now it was returning with uncomfortable intensity. But alongside the anxiety was something else, a sense of purpose that she hadn't experienced since leaving the military. The knowledge that her specialized skills might prevent significant harm to innocent people. Maya prepared for the mission with the methodical care that had characterized her military service, checking equipment, reviewing procedures, and mentally rehearsing various scenarios and contingencies. By 5:45 a.m., she was dressed in business attire that concealed her communication and detection equipment, carrying identification that established her as Dr. Maya Nakamura, and ready to enter a situation that would either validate her decision to help her destroy the carefully constructed civilian life she had spent 3 years building. As the team prepared to move toward the convention center, Park approached Maya with an expression that mixed professional confidence with personal concern. "You don't have to do this. Even now, you could walk away and let us handle it with conventional methods." Maya checked the scanner device one final time, ensuring it was properly calibrated and functioning correctly. "No," she said quietly, "I really can't." Maya arrived at the convention center at 5:52 a.m., 8 minutes ahead of schedule, but within the acceptable window for early setup access. The morning air carried the crisp quality that marked Pacific Northwest autumn, and the streets around the building showed the quiet activity of a city preparing for another day of commerce and routine. Security personnel were conducting their shift change, a process Maya observed carefully while maintaining the casual demeanor of someone arriving early for professional obligations. Her identification as Dr. Maya Nakamura passed the first checkpoint without question. The security guard, a middle-aged man who appeared to be working his way through a large coffee and fighting off the last traces of overnight fatigue, scanned her badge and checked her name against the early access list. Maya noted his procedures, the positioning of surveillance cameras, and the general flow of personnel entering and exiting the building. "First time at Tech Forward?" the guard asked conversationally as he handed back her credentials. "Second year attending, but first time as a consultant rather than general admission," Maya replied, maintaining the kind of professional friendliness that characterized business interactions without encouraging extended conversation. "Looking forward to the security technology demonstrations this afternoon." The guard nodded and directed her toward the main exhibition hall, where early setup was already in progress. Maya entered the building and immediately began the systematic observation that would guide her activities for the next several hours. The convention center's interior was exactly as the floor plans had indicated, but experiencing the space directly provided nuances that architectural drawings couldn't convey. The main exhibition hall was vast, with 30-foot ceilings supported by a grid of steel beams that created numerous potential concealment points for weapon systems. Multiple levels of access, including maintenance catwalks and service corridors, provided infiltration routes that wouldn't be covered by standard security procedures. The acoustic properties of the space would make detection of mechanical sounds difficult during periods of high attendance, but would also amplify any explosive or projectile weapons to levels that could cause immediate panic. Maya moved through this space methodically, using her scanner to establish baseline readings, while appearing to conduct the kind of professional reconnaissance that a security consultant would perform. The device detected no anomalous signatures during her initial sweep, but given the sophistication of the weapon systems and the early hour, this wasn't unexpected. Professional operators would likely position their equipment closer to the planned deployment time to minimize the risk of detection. Around 7 a.m., the building began filling with exhibitors, technical staff, and early arriving attendees. Maya positioned herself near the registration area, observing the crowd while maintaining periodic scanner sweeps of high-probability concealment locations. The demographic was typical for technology conferences, predominantly male, skewing toward middle age, with the kind of expensive casual attire that marked successful professionals rather than academic researchers or students. Maya recognized several individuals from the photographs she had studied during the overnight briefing. Dr. Richard Hayes, scheduled to deliver the 2 p.m. keynote on artificial intelligence in defense applications. Janet Morrison, Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Emerging Technologies. Colonel Maria Santos, representing the Army's Advanced Weapons Research Division. These were precisely the kind of high-value targets that would attract terrorist attention, individuals whose deaths would generate international headlines and potentially disrupt ongoing defense research programs. At 7:23 a.m., Maya's scanner detected the first anomalous reading. The signal was faint and intermittent, suggesting either a partially assembled system or one that was being moved through the building. Maya followed the signal vector toward the service corridors that connected the main exhibition hall to the smaller conference rooms, where afternoon breakout sessions would be held. The source of the signal appeared to be located somewhere above the suspended ceiling tiles, accessible through maintenance areas that would require keyed access or technical expertise to reach. Maya noted the location and continued her systematic survey, but the detection confirmed that hostile actors were already positioning equipment within the building. Maya's earpiece crackled with a brief transmission from the support team. "Overwatch 1, this is Control. Status report." Maya touched her collar in a gesture that appeared to be adjusting her clothing, but actually activated her transmission system. Control, Overwatch 1, first contact confirmed, service level, grid 7 alpha. Signal strength suggests partial deployment, continuing systematic search. Copy, Overwatch 1, maintain surveillance protocols. Additional personnel arriving. On schedule. Maya acknowledged the transmission and continued her reconnaissance, but with heightened awareness that the operation was now active rather than preparatory. Somewhere in the building, people with advanced weapon systems were conducting their own final preparations, probably unaware that their activities were being monitored, but certainly prepared for the possibility of discovery. At 8:15 a.m., the conference officially opened with a general welcome session in the main auditorium. Maya attended along with roughly 800 other early arrivals, using the opportunity to study crowd patterns and security positioning while maintaining periodic scanner sweeps. The detection equipment registered 2 additional signals during the presentation, both from elevated positions that suggested concealment within the building's infrastructure rather than among the attendee population. During the first break between sessions, Maya positioned herself near the main security checkpoint and observed the arrival procedures for VIP attendees. Dr. Hayes and his security detail entered through a side entrance that bypassed general security screening, a protocol that would be repeated for other high-value speakers throughout the day. Maya noted the timing and positioning, recognizing that these predictable patterns would provide targeting opportunities for anyone with advanced knowledge of the schedule. Maya's scanner detected its strongest signal yet at 9:47 a.m., originating from the vicinity of the main auditorium's lighting control booth. The booth was elevated above the main floor, provided clear lines of sight to the stage and seating areas, and would be largely unoccupied except during specific technical operations. Maya approached the area casually, using a service stairway that was accessible to conference attendees, but not heavily traveled. The lighting booth was secured by a standard commercial lock that Maya bypassed in less than 30 seconds, using tools concealed within her conference materials. Inside, she found sophisticated electronic equipment that matched the specifications of the stolen weapon systems, partially assembled and positioned to target the main stage area where the afternoon keynote presentation would occur. Maya photographed the equipment quickly, transmitted the images to the support team, and began the delicate process of disabling the system without triggering any anti-tampering mechanisms that might alert the operators. Her knowledge of the weapon's design allowed her to identify critical components and disable them in ways that wouldn't be immediately obvious to casual inspection. Her earpiece activated as she worked. Overwatch 1, control. Confirm neutralization of Target 1. Control, Overwatch 1, Target 1 neutralized. Estimating 3 additional units based on scanner data. Requires systematic approach to avoid alerting hostile operators. Copy, maintain current procedures. Law enforcement assets standing by for deployment on your signal. Maya completed her work in the lighting booth and returned to the main conference areas, but her scanner immediately detected movement in one of the previously identified signal locations. Someone was repositioning equipment, possibly in response to a predetermined schedule, or possibly because they had detected her interference with the first system. Maya moved quickly toward the source of the new activity, using service corridors and maintenance areas to avoid detection while closing distance to the next weapons position. Her route took her through parts of the building that were closed to general attendees, areas where her presence would be immediately suspicious if she encountered building security or hostile operators. The second weapon system was located in a storage area adjacent to the main exhibition hall, positioned to target the central aisle where maximum crowd density would occur during transition periods between sessions. Maya approached the area carefully, using her scanner to verify that no personnel were present before entering the space. Inside the storage room, she found not only the second weapon system, but also evidence of more extensive preparation than intelligence estimates had suggested. Communication equipment, additional ammunition, and what appeared to be chemical agents that could be deployed as area denial weapons if the primary attack was disrupted. Maya documented everything quickly, transmitted the information to the support team, and began neutralizing the equipment. As she worked, Maya heard footsteps approaching the storage area. She completed her disabling procedures quickly, concealed her tools, and positioned herself near the door to observe whoever was approaching. Through the small window in the storage room door, she saw a man in maintenance coveralls carrying what appeared to be routine cleaning equipment, but moving with the purposeful efficiency that marked tactical rather than custodial activity. Maya waited until the man passed before exiting the storage area, but her scanner indicated that he was carrying electronic equipment consistent with the weapon systems. She followed at a discreet distance, using crowd cover and building features to maintain surveillance while avoiding detection. The man led her to a third location, a conference room that was scheduled to remain empty until the afternoon breakout sessions. Maya watched him enter the room and begin unpacking equipment that was definitely not cleaning supplies. She positioned herself where she could observe the room's entrance while transmitting location information to the support team. Her earpiece crackled with an urgent transmission. Overwatch 1 Control. We have movement on building perimeter. At least 6 additional subjects approaching from multiple vectors. Timeline may be accelerating. Maya checked her watch. It was 11:34 a.m., more than 2 hours ahead of the planned 2 p.m. attack time. Something had triggered an acceleration of the hostile timeline, possibly her interference with the first weapons system, or possibly external factors that the support team had detected. Control, Overwatch 1, confirming accelerated timeline. Subject is actively deploying System 3. Requesting permission to engage directly. There was a pause before Control responded, probably while the support team assessed risks and alternatives. Overwatch 1, you are authorized to engage as necessary to prevent deployment. Law enforcement moving to perimeter positions but cannot enter building without risking civilian casualties. Maya acknowledged the transmission and prepared for direct confrontation. She had hoped to disable all 4 weapon systems covertly, maintaining her cover while preventing the attack through technical sabotage. But the accelerated timeline and additional personnel entering the building meant that stealth was no longer sufficient. Maya approached the conference room where the third weapon system was being deployed, using techniques that belonged entirely to her military training rather than her civilian cover identity. She moved silently, efficiently, with the kind of controlled aggression that characterized close-quarters combat operations. The door to the conference room was unlocked. Maya entered quickly, finding the maintenance coverall man in the process of assembling what was clearly the most sophisticated of the stolen weapon systems. He looked up as she entered, his expression changing from surprise to recognition to hostile intent in the space of about 2 seconds. "Dr. Maya Nakamura, I presume," he said in accented English, his hands continuing to work on the weapons assembly even as he spoke. "Or should I say Staff Sergeant Maya Chen, formerly of the 75th Ranger Regiment." Maya closed the door behind her and activated a signal jammer that would prevent the man from communicating with any Confederates. "You should step away from the equipment and place your hands where I can see them." The man smiled and continued his assembly work. "I think not. You see, Dr. Chun, we have been expecting you. Your former colleagues were quite informative about your capabilities before they died." Maya felt ice forming in her stomach at the pie. Confirmation that her former team members had been tortured for information before being killed. But she pushed the emotional reaction aside, focusing on the immediate tactical situation. Last warning. Step away from the weapons system. Instead of complying, the man reached for what appeared to be a remote detonator. Maya moved immediately. crossing the room in 3 quick steps and engaging him in hand-to-hand combat before he could activate whatever device he was reaching for. The fight was brief but intense. The man was clearly trained in close-quarters combat, but Maya's muscle, memory, and reflexes proved superior. Within 30 seconds, he was unconscious on the floor, and Maya was in control of both the weapon system and the detonator he had been attempting to use. Maya quickly disabled the 3rd weapon system and secured the detonator, then bound the unconscious man with zip ties from her equipment kit. She was photographing the communications equipment when her earpiece activated with an urgent transmission. Overwatch 1, Control. We have confirmation of the 4th weapon system activation. Main auditorium, upper level, east side. Estimate: 2 minutes until deployment capability. Maya checked her scanner and confirmed the signal location. The 4th system was positioned in exactly the location that would provide optimal coverage of the main auditorium during the keynote presentation, which was scheduled to begin in less than 20 minutes. Even with the accelerated timeline, hundreds of people were already gathering in the auditorium for the featured speaker. Control, Overwatch 1, en route to Target 4. Advise law enforcement to begin evacuation procedures, but maintain low profile to avoid panic. Maya left the conference room and moved rapidly toward the main auditorium, no longer concerned with maintaining her civilian cover. The building's security cameras would record her movements, but preventing mass casualties took priority over preserving her anonymity. The route to the auditorium's upper level took her through areas that were crowded with conference attendees transitioning between morning sessions and lunch. Maya moved through the crowd efficiently, but without creating disturbance, using her knowledge of building layout to reach her destination as quickly as possible. The 4th weapon system was located in a projection booth that overlooked the main auditorium. Maya could see through the booth's windows that someone was inside, making final preparations for what would presumably be a devastating attack on the crowd gathering below. Unlike the previous locations, this position was occupied by an alert and presumably armed operator. Maya considered her options quickly. A direct assault on the projection booth would likely trigger immediate deployment of the weapon system, causing exactly the casualties she was trying to prevent. But waiting for law enforcement support might allow the attack to proceed on schedule, with equally devastating results. Maya activated her communication system. Control, Overwatch 1. Target 4 is occupied and active. Requesting immediate evacuation of main auditorium under emergency protocols. Overwatch 1. Building security is initiating fire alarm evacuation. Estimate 3 minutes for crowd dispersal. Can you delay deployment? Maya studied the projection booth and the positioning of the weapon system visible through its windows. Control, I'm going to attempt neutralization. If I'm unsuccessful, recommend immediate law enforcement breach regardless of civilian presence. Maya approached the projection booth using the service corridor that provided concealment until she was within striking distance of the entrance. The door was locked, but she bypassed it quickly using the same technique she had employed earlier. Inside, she found a woman in her 30s, clearly professional in her bearing and completely focused on the weapon system she was preparing to deploy. Step away from the controls, Maya said quietly, her hand positioned near the concealed weapon she carried for emergency situations. The woman looked up without apparent surprise. Sergeant Chen, we have been waiting for you to arrive. Her accent was different from the man Maya had encountered earlier, but her confidence was similarly unsettling. The building is being evacuated. Your attack will accomplish nothing except to confirm that your organization has access to advanced weapon systems. The woman smiled and gestured toward the windows overlooking the auditorium. Look more carefully. Sergeant, the evacuation is not proceeding as efficiently as your colleagues might hope. Maya glanced quickly toward the auditorium and saw that while people were indeed moving toward the exits, The process was chaotic and slow. The fire alarm had triggered confusion rather than orderly evacuation, and several hundred people were still in the main seating area where they would be vulnerable to weapons fire from the projection booth. Your choice, Sergeant Chen. You can attempt to stop me, which will result in immediate deployment against whatever targets remain available. Or you can allow me to proceed with the original timeline, which will provide opportunity for more complete evacuation. Maya recognized the tactical dilemma immediately. Either choice resulted in civilian casualties, but one option might minimize the damage while the other could maximize it. The woman was clearly prepared for resistance and had positioned herself where any struggle would likely trigger the weapons system regardless of its intended outcome. There is a third option, Maya said quietly. You can surrender now, and we can work together to ensure that no one gets hurt. The woman laughed. Surrender? To someone who spent 3 years hiding behind a coffee machine, pretending to be a harmless civilian? I think not. Maya moved before the woman finished speaking, crossing the small booth in 2 quick steps and engaging her in close-quarters combat that was more intense than her previous encounter. This opponent was better trained and more prepared, forcing Maya to use techniques and reflexes that she hadn't employed since her final military deployment. The fight lasted nearly a full minute, during which both women struggled for control of the weapon system while attempting to disable or incapacitate the other. Maya's superior training eventually prevailed, but not before the woman managed to activate a partial deployment sequence that couldn't be immediately stopped. Maya found herself facing a countdown timer showing 47 seconds until the weapons system would engage automatically, targeting whatever remained in the auditorium below. She had less than a minute to either complete the evacuation or disable a system that had been designed specifically to resist tampering under pressure. Maya's training took over completely. She accessed the weapon system's control interface and began entering the shutdown sequences she had memorized during the original development program. But the system had been modified since its military configuration, with additional security protocols that required different procedures than she remembered. Maya worked frantically through multiple shutdown attempts while monitoring the countdown timer and the evacuation progress in the auditorium below. With 22 seconds remaining, she located the manual override controls and began the physical disabling procedure that would render the system inoperative regardless of its programming. The process required removing several key components in a specific sequence, a procedure that had to be completed perfectly to avoid triggering the anti-tampering mechanisms that would cause immediate deployment. Maya's hands moved with practiced precision through the disassembly sequence, her muscle memory guiding actions that her conscious mind barely had time to process. With 7 seconds remaining on the countdown timer, Maya completed the final disabling step and watched the system's displays go dark. The weapons system was neutralized, the evacuation was nearly complete, and the immediate crisis was over. Maya activated her communication system. Control, Overwatch 1, Target 4 neutralized, all weapon systems disabled. Building secure. For law enforcement entry. The response came immediately, with obvious relief in the controller's voice. Overwatch 1, outstanding work. Law enforcement moving to your location. Medical team standing by for wounded personnel. Maya secured. The unconscious woman with restraints from her equipment kit then sat down heavily in one of the booth's chairs. The adrenaline that had sustained her through the morning's operations was beginning to fade, leaving behind the familiar exhaustion that followed high-stress tactical situations. Through the booth's windows, Maya could see that the auditorium evacuation was nearly complete. Security personnel were beginning to sweep the building systematically, ensuring that no additional threats remained hidden. In the distance, she could hear sirens approaching as additional law enforcement and emergency medical teams responded to the situation. Maya remained in the projection booth, until law enforcement personnel arrived to secure the scene and take custody of the woman she had captured. She provided a brief tactical summary of the morning's events, emphasizing the locations of the disabled weapon systems and the intelligence materials that would require specialized handling. As she prepared to leave the projection booth, Maya realized that her civilian cover was completely destroyed. The security camera recordings would show her moving through restricted areas, engaging in hand-to-hand combat and demonstrating capabilities that no coffee shop employee should possess. Dr. Maya Nakamura's identity might survive, but Maya Chen, the barista, was finished. Lieutenant Colonel Park met her at the building's main security checkpoint, where she underwent debriefing procedures that would provide intelligence analysts with detailed information about the terrorist operation and the weapon systems that had been deployed. The process was familiar from her military service, though conducted with greater urgency due to the ongoing investigation into how classified information had been compromised. Preliminary assessment suggests we prevented casualties that could have numbered in the hundreds, Park told her as they walked toward the exit. The weapon systems were positioned for maximum effect, and the operators were clearly prepared for extended engagement with law enforcement. Maya nodded, but her attention was focused on the crowd of conference attendees gathered outside the building. These were the people she had spent the morning protecting, individuals who would probably never know how close they had come to being victims of an attack that combined advanced military technology with terrorist tactics. "What happens now?" Maya asked as they reached the building's perimeter. Park handed her a folder containing what appeared to be official paperwork. "Full reinstatement at your previous rank, as promised. Backdated pay and benefits, clean personnel records, and a commendation that will probably remain classified for the next 20 years. Maya accepted the folder but didn't open it immediately. "And my civilian life? Compromised beyond repair, as you know. But we have resources for establishing new civilian identities if you choose to return to private life. Different city, different profession, same level of anonymity you had in Portland." Maya considered the offer while watching emergency medical teams treat personnel who had been injured during the evacuation. The prospect of rebuilding her civilian life in another location was appealing in some ways, offering the possibility of returning to the peaceful routine she had enjoyed for 3 years. But Maya also realized that something fundamental had changed during the morning's operations. The sense of purpose and professional competence she had felt while neutralizing the weapons systems was different from the satisfaction she derived from preparing excellent coffee or maintaining espresso equipment. This was the work she had been trained for, the application of specialized skills in service of protecting people who couldn't protect themselves. "There is another option," Park said quietly. "We could use someone with your background and capabilities for ongoing operations. The threat landscape is evolving rapidly, and traditional law enforcement agencies aren't equipped to handle the kind of sophisticated attacks we prevented today." Maya looked back toward the convention center, where investigators were beginning the detailed work of analyzing the terrorist operation and gathering intelligence about future threats. "What kind of operations?" "The kind that prevent situations like this from developing in the first place. Intelligence gathering, threat assessment, and direct action when necessary. Similar to what you did today, but with better support and more comprehensive mission planning." Maya considered the proposition while emergency personnel completed their work around the building. The choice was between safety and purpose, between personal anonymity and professional fulfillment. 3 years ago, she had chosen safety, walking away from military service in favor of civilian peace. Today, circumstances had forced her to choose purpose, accepting personal risk in order to prevent harm to others. "I need some time to think about it," Maya said finally. Park nodded. "Take all the time you need. But Maya, I want you to know that what you did today saved hundreds of lives. Whatever you decide about the future, that accomplishment stands on its own. As emergency operations concluded and the area around the convention center returned to something approaching normal activity, Maya found herself thinking about the coffee shop she hadn't opened that morning. Jessica would have arrived to find the doors locked and no explanation for Maya's absence. The regular customers would have been inconvenienced, forced to find alternative sources for their morning caffeine. By tomorrow, someone else would be responsible for opening grind coffee and serving the familiar drinks to customers who expected reliable routine. Maya Chen, the barista, would become a minor mystery, someone who had simply disappeared from their lives without explanation or closure. But Staff Sergeant Maya Chen had returned, demonstrating capabilities that had saved lives and prevented a disaster that could have dominated international headlines for weeks. The woman who had assembled espresso machines with methodical precision had disassembled advanced weapon systems with the same careful attention to detail, applying skills that belonged to both identities. As Maya walked away from the convention center, she realized that the choice between her civilian and military identities had already been made. She had spent 3 years trying to suppress the training and instincts that defined her professional capabilities, but today had proved that suppression was neither complete nor permanent. The question now was not whether to return to military service, but how to integrate her specialized skills with a life that provided the stability and purpose she needed. Maya Chen the barista might be finished, but Maya Chen the protector had work to do. 2 weeks later, Maya stood behind the counter of a small coffee shop in downtown Seattle, wearing an apron that bore the logo of Sentinel Coffee Company and preparing drinks for the morning rush. The routine was familiar, but with important differences from her previous civilian life. The coffee shop was owned and operated by a private security company that specialized in discreet protection services for high-value individuals and sensitive locations. Maya's official job title was hospitality specialist, but her actual responsibilities included threat assessment, surveillance detection, and emergency response for a clientele that included technology executives, government officials, and defense contractors. The espresso machine was state-of-the-art, but it also incorporated communication equipment that connected Maya to a broader network of security professionals. The regular customers included individuals whose safety was her responsibility, people who trusted her to serve excellent coffee while maintaining awareness of potential threats to their security. Maya had found a way to integrate her military capabilities with civilian life, using skills developed during years of special operations training to protect people who lived and worked in the ordinary world. She was still making coffee, but she was also making a difference in ways that honored both aspects of her identity. As she prepared a cortado for a customer who happened to be a senior Defense Department official, Maya reflected on the path that had brought her to this moment. 3 weeks ago, she had been hiding her true capabilities behind the facade of ordinary civilian employment. Today, she was applying those capabilities in service of people who needed protection but preferred to receive it discreetly. The morning rush continued with its predictable patterns, but Maya remained alert for signs of anything unusual or potentially threatening. She served excellent coffee, engaged in appropriate social interaction with regular customers, and maintained the kind of situational awareness that would allow her to respond immediately to any emergency situation. Maya Chen the barista had evolved into something more complex and more purposeful, someone who could honor both her military training and her civilian aspirations. She had found a way to protect people while maintaining the routine and stability that made civilian life appealing. As the morning settled into its familiar rhythm, Maya smiled slightly while steaming milk for another customer's order. She had learned that identity didn't require choosing between different aspects of herself, but rather finding ways to integrate them in service of something larger than personal comfort or safety. The coffee was excellent, the customers were safe, and Maya Chen had finally found work that utilized all of her capabilities in pursuit of purposes that mattered. Sometimes the most extraordinary service came disguised as the most ordinary routine. And the most important skills were the ones that remained invisible until the moment they were desperately needed. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.